Добро вечер, драги гледачи. Како што знаете, за жал, на македонската заедница после 20 години и е укинат грантот за социјален работник. На 12 ноември во Македонскиот културен центар на сите наши социјални работници во овие изминати 20 години им беа врачени благодарници. Веруваме дека сеќавањата кои ќе ги слушнете ќе ви ги прикажат 20 години на нашата социјална служба, која за жал веќе ја немаме. Ви пожелуваме пријатна програма.
Егеј наш македонски солзи пролеја, од гради топли мајчински, дечиња се откина, по светот се распрска, детски игри оставија. Каде сте, македончиња? Каде сте, кај отидовте? Жално плаче мајка егејска, за вас плаче Македонија. Каде сте, македончиња? Каде сте, кај отидовте? Жално плаче мајка егејска, за вас плаче Македонија.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let me say a few words in English. My Polish isn't very good. Perhaps my Macedonian is not much better, but certainly my Polish isn't very good. And by virtue of the fact that we have a special guest here this evening, let me say a few words in English. Believe it or not, it was 19 years ago when the Macedonian community here in Adelaide and South Australia had the opportunity of, in those days, indirectly employing its first social worker. That, of course, as most of you know, was young Stephen Kostov over there. He was young then, I'm not so sure whether he's still young. But Stephen was the first social worker, and we'll invite him in a few moments to share a few of his memories of those early days. But before we go too much further, I just want to extend a warm welcome to a friend of ours, and he is a friend of ours, Mr. Mariusz Konečka.
Yes, thank you, Mariusz.
Mariusz is from the Department of Immigration and Multicultural Affairs, and works in the part of the department that has ongoing responsibility for assisting and supervising the various welfare programs which are established in the community organisations with funding assistance from the department. Now, Mariusz has in the past spent some time assisting our program, and we're very grateful that he could be with us tonight. There's another gentleman, of course, that spent as much time and probably a little bit more than Mariusz helping the Macedonian community, as he did with other community organisations, in administering their welfare programs, and that's Mr. Ugo Rotellini. Ugo was invited to come this evening. Unfortunately, he had other commitments. In fact, I think he's gone away on holiday, is that right? But he was very kind. He sent us last night an apology in written form, saying that he wished us well this evening, and saying that he indeed enjoyed his time cooperating and working with the Macedonian Community Organisation in relation to the welfare grant. All right, we go further. It's customary to invite the president of the organisation, Mr. Lou Velov, to say a few words.
Dobar dan, Michael, Martino, Marija. Драги сънародници, кај што слушнавте, 19 години поменаја од нашата општина што имаме социјален работник. Околу тие години за севте имаме големи маки и тамо сакам јас да му благодарам на еден што беше доста инволвиран околу работата, беше Коста Радин. Исто така и јас, од време още кога беше под рамките на Migrant Resource Center, социјалната работа. И во тие 19 години, од моја страна, кај што се запознат јаска, тоа беше едно добро нешто што имаше човек тука да му служи на народот што му треба. И тие услови ние се пробавме да има за нашите луѓе што сакаат помош или нови имигранти што не гледат. И за жалост сега дојде време што треба таа официја да се затвори, бидејќи нови сега гледат имигранти и ние постари и се гледаат и чудат работата и не е толку важно да има социјален работник во нашата општина. И затоа го изгубиме работата. Ама ако е потребно, так ние преку општината и тие што имаат малце искуство, што беа, благодарение на последно на томе, ќе се мачиме да му поможеме на тој народ што треба. Благодарам много.
To 1980, and as a result of several developments in the late 1970s, the Galbally report, which recommended the establishment of migrant resource centres to help migrants and their families. Our migrant resource centre in Adelaide was established, and within the framework of the migrant resource centre in Adelaide, a welfare grant to assist the so-called Yugoslav communities, as it was then known. Of course, the circumstances in 1980 were very different from the circumstances that apply today, and some of the tensions that were apparent in the Yugoslav communities in those days led eventually to the breakup of that grant. It was felt that it was not possible to maintain it as one single grant anymore. But in 1980, things were a little bit different, and a grant was given to establish a grant-in-aid worker for the so-called Yugoslav communities, and specifically the Serbian, Croatian, Slovenian and Macedonian communities were targeted as needing assistance. Now that's a pretty big job. One day, it's not appropriate tonight, but one day if you have an opportunity you can speak to Kosta Radin and some others about some of the politics that went on behind the scene as to the issue of who should be the first grant-in-aid worker, whether it should be a Serbian or whether it should be a Croatian. Those two seem to balance each other out. And so at the end of the day, it was decided that the best, perhaps most diplomatic result was that a Macedonian should be appointed to serve the interests not only of the Macedonian community but the other communities as well. So that's a big ask, and it needs someone with big shoulders, and someone with big shoulders was found in 1980, although his shoulders were a bit smaller in 1980 than they are now. But anyway, that was Stephen Kostoff, our very own Stephen Kostoff, and I want to invite Stephen to come forward and just briefly tell us what it was like in 1980 working as the Yugoslav Grant in Aid worker at the Migrant Resource Centre. Share with us some of his memories, some good moments, and maybe some not so good moments. And then when Stephen's told us about that, we'll make a small presentation to him as a gesture of our thanks for the efforts that he made in those very early days, the pioneering days for the welfare program. Steve, thanks. Would you like to come up and say a few words?
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, everybody. Mr. President, our guest Marush Konechka from Immigration, committee members and friends and family, thank you for joining us tonight to talk, reflect a little bit on the history of our welfare grant that is now, as Michael said, in its last year, 19 years old. Can I tell you a little bit before we actually got started? Michael started to discuss that there were the Serbian members and the Croatian members. We used to meet with Conrad and Louis Basilu. We used to meet with the Ethnic Communities Council in King William Street. It was a small group of European community members. Most of them were fairly old. They were even older than Uncle Costa there.
Oh, that old.
Costa Rivera. And I was 18, 19, 17, 18, 19, 20. We started meeting about 1976, 77, and as Michael mentioned, the Galbelli report released a lot of money. I think $50 million, was released into the Australian economy to fund migrant projects. I'm relying on memory now, it's a very long time ago. And everybody wanted a worker for their community because it was free money. Free money. But immigration kept saying, you can only have one. You can have one worker there, not 4 or 5. And so we would meet and we would discuss the community politics, and the Serbian guy who was called Mr. Angelkovic would argue with Father Dusan from the Croatian community, the priest. I've never seen a priest argue before. First time. Frank Falzon from the Slovenian community. And us would be there, and we would all be pushing our story. We want a worker. No, you want a worker. No, we want a worker. But we could only have one. Very few people understood the politics of our communities. We were Yugoslavian. Everybody was Yugoslavian. Your language is Yugoslavian. If you're Macedonian, you're probably Greek. Serbian, you're okay. Croatian, you're okay. And then these fellas, the older guys, they got together on a committee and they talked some of the politics I don't remember, I don't understand, but they agreed that there could not be a Serbian person working in the Croatian community. They agreed there could not be a Croatian person working in the Serbian community. The Slovenes were too small at that stage, and the Macedonians to them was not a problem. That's why they called me. I was on Kangaroo Island with Adelaide University catching kangaroos.
Sure you were.
I was. And they said, come back to Adelaide, we need to have a talk to you. They decided that the grant could go to either Slovenes or the Macedonian community. If a person could be found and assist with all the communities. If the person had some qualifications, if the person understood a little bit of the politics, we could have that person join us. The person had to speak Macedonian, Serbian, Croatian, Slovenian, and Yugoslavian. 5 languages. Bulgarian. Yeah, Bulgarian. So I learned zdravo. And I worked from there for 4 years from 1980. There was lots of money to spend. We were spending money on fittings, and we had to buy chairs and tables, and we had to start from the ground up. We started 3 or 4 times because the location was wrong. 1 year in Curry Street, 1 year in Peel Street, 1 year in Guja Street, or more after that, and then somewhere else I've gone. My work at that time was, as a social worker, was to discuss personal problems, family problems, community problems with people, with individual people, with their families, and with the communities. I started to go into the Serbian community, into the Croatian community. It was very hard. The Serbians didn't like me. The Croatians didn't like me. It was very hard. You know, you go and the study of playing cards, nobody wants to talk to you. Somebody would say, look, Vamu, you know, go home. It was very difficult. It was very, very difficult. But I was one of the only people that could control a little bit of the politics, because I did not upset them. I tried not to upset them. Macedonians always trying to balance out problems. We're very good at it. We're always very good at being diplomatic. There was some problems I couldn't fix. The Greek consulate I couldn't fix. Every time I went to a function with the immigration department, I remember the Dutch club or the German club, or just like Marush tonight, he's coming here. He's listening patiently, he takes his own time. I would go with immigration, we would be invited somewhere. And if the Greek consulate was there, he would walk out. He would leave. He would not stay. He refused to acknowledge me for 4 years. The next day I'd get a call from immigration department, from my bigger boss, Kevin Kinner. Stephen, what did you do to the Greek consulate? I just turned up. I didn't do anything.
Did you change your deodorant?
I don't know where he ended up. His name was Kamilos. Osbury, went to Woodville. We did some very good things. A lot of people started to come there. We were a centre to help as many communities as possible, but still helping my communities. I'm pretty sure Marush came through there when he first came to Australia. I learned some Polish. Dzień dobry, and proszę bardzo, and pani and panu, and
what about those
and vodka.
What about those other
And it was an exciting time. The migrant intake was changing. We weren't seeing many Macedonians. We weren't seeing many Italians. We were seeing Polish people, Vietnamese people, Indo-Chinese people. Some Bulgarian people started coming through. I went to work in the hospitals. I started to work in Hillcrest Hospital and Yatla Labour Prison. Macedonians aren't all very good people. Serbians and Croatians aren't all good people. Some of them end up in jail. So I used to spend a lot of time in Yatla and Hillcrest and Glenside hospitals. It was very interesting time. I started to work in schools. I started to teach kids about trying to get a job and how to do better applications and how to talk better in interviews and whatever else they could do to help them get a job. So a lot of things that you didn't see. Sometimes people said, what do you do there? What do you do? It's the type of job that you maybe not see the results. I think Tom and Jenny and many of the others who've worked in this area sometimes feel very frustrated because you don't see what they do. You don't see what they do. But it was very difficult at times. Very difficult. In the final year, the final period of the Migrant Resource Centre, Michael came in as a committee member. Michael was becoming very prominent around us. We were very proud of his work. The committees that were running the Migrant Resource Centre were very difficult to work with. We've all been on committees before. Committees are volunteer bodies. They are very hard to work with. We have those difficulties here. Everybody has different ideas. It's hard to manage the team. And in the Migrant Resource Centre, I found it was getting very hard to work with my committee. And so after 4 years, I decided to move, and that was the end really of the full-time grant that we had in our community at that time. I say it was a fantastic job. It was a fantastic place. There was fantastic people, very helpful people to work with. It helped me in my life. It helped me in my job. And I hope that I help some people. I hope that I help some kids, or some of the study, or some of the others, not just in this community, but I still see some Serbian people that I know, some Croatian people that I know. I still see them, and I'm fairly proud that I could cut across some of the politics and some of the language and cultural problems, the barriers, and actually help people, human being to human being. So, thank you for having me. Thank you very much for supporting me. Before you sit down, on behalf of the community, we'd like to give a small token of our appreciation to Steve, because just like some of you here were pioneers, you were the first people to set up the organisation, to be on the committee, women's committee, etc. Well, Steve was the first one to work in this area of welfare to assist our community, and as you heard, some of the other communities. And that's no small task, no small job, as you heard. And he did a terrific effort, and we'd just like to award you a certificate, and as a token of our appreciation, we've got some nice souvenirs that you should take home. You've never seen anything before. Thank you very much, Michael.
And in one of these, Steve, I think it's a photograph of you in the Migrant Resource.
Yes, there are some photographs of that time.
Afterwards,
thank you.
you all may all want to come forward, and we'll open one of these to the page where, here he is, page 64. Stephen Kostoff, aged
21.
21. Please come and have a look at it, and you'll see how we all get old.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Well
Thank you,
done,
everybody.
He moved on in 1984, and it wasn't long after that that the Immigration Department, the government, realised that it was impossible for various reasons to keep one grant to serve all of the so-called Yugoslav communities, including the Macedonian community. So what they did around about that time was that they divided the grant into two. and created two half grants. One grant was for the Serbs and the Macedonians together, and the other grant, half grant, was for the Croats and the Slovenians together. Now, there was a lady, a Serbian lady, who worked in that half grant. Her name was Kristina Lulic, and she worked for a time helping our people as well as helping the Serbian people. I'm not sure how successful that was. I think at the end of the day it was probably a frustrating experience for Kristina and for a lot of other people. So at the end of the day, the Immigration Department made a pragmatic decision to split the half grant into quarters. So we were given 10 hours, 1 quarter of a grant, 10 hours a week. And of course we had to find a couple of willing workers to work the 10 hours a week in the welfare program, which was still located in the Migrant Resource Centre. And one of the people that put up his hand was our current president, Mr. Lou Verloff, and he dutifully, together with another person who I'll mention in a minute, worked for a number of months as the welfare program worker based at the Migrant Resource Centre. So Lou, can I ask you to come up again and perhaps have a word about what you did in those days and tell everybody what went on. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. Actually, it was a good experience. As Stephen mentioned earlier, I know he was a young fellow, and the way it was structured under the Yugoslav grant. But I was actually very proud to be one of the first ones, but only 10 hours, as the Macedonian grant. And that was the whole aim for our community, actually, and Con Rudding, which was involved in the electing committee there. We really wanted to have a Macedonian worker. And yes, I did put my hand up because if we couldn't find anybody at that particular time, which was pretty sudden, we could have lost the grant. And then at the time I was committed, as you're all aware, in the work I was doing, but I still put my hand up, and I allocated those 10 hours to retain that grant to help the Macedonian people, and I felt that it was well worth it. And from then we kept working on it, and we finally brought it in our premises, and that lasted for probably 12-15 years on our premises. 12 years in our premises, and I think the community did a good job with some of the helpers, and that was a success because, as I mentioned earlier, we provided a service for the people that needed it. And that was our whole aim. I wasn't interested in anything else. I think Steve, at your age, you would have. But the way we looked at it was we wanted to give the service to our people that required it, and that was our aim. And I enjoyed it. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. We've got a certificate of appreciation signed by the President here. You'll appreciate that. And your photo is, you had a bit more hair in that photo.
Yeah, got a breath.
Thanks very much.
kraj. A ovo je hi-fi dvoboj, god dobiva onoj. Či prozor ti će prsnat prvi na praćenja bezbroj. Hi-fi fanatici, knockout među zvučnici. Hi-fi zapisnici, knockout među zvučnici. MCASA round toj montirao sam. Razbuden na svoj teren, dušom finskom zloupotreben. Gdje vidi se ga ti, vidi se ga ti. Me predizlikovan. Gdje vidiš se ga ti, vidi se ga ti. Knockout među zvučnici. Ti prd počna znaj i vidi frajer do kraj. A ovo je hi-fi dvoboj, god dobiva onoj. Či prozor ti će prsnat prvi na praćenja bezbroj. Hi-fi fanatici, knockout među zvučnici. Hi-fi zapisnici, knockout među zvučnici.
Around about that time too, we had another young lady who was helping out 10 hours a week. She couldn't be here tonight because she lives in Perth, and I'm talking about Faye Georgievsky. But her mother, Linka Petre, is here tonight, and she can accept this on her behalf. Faye helped us out a lot as well in those days. Not only did Faye work in the welfare program for a while, but of course she's well known because she worked in our musical group, and she helped us in Culture Week, and she did a lot for the community. So can we give Faye Georgievsky a big clap, even though she's not here? Maybe she'll give. Would you like to give Faye when she next comes to Adelaide? I know she comes at Christmas time, as a token of our appreciation, and also one of these and one of these for Faye, and give her our best wishes. We always say
Ovaj naš vrh
Community of Adelaide in South Australia, we applied for and were given a grant for a half-time grant in aid worker, as it was then known. So we had to go about the process of selecting a worker to work here in the community premises, and as you know, that successful candidate was Jenny Trampevaradin, who in those days was neither Trampeva nor Radin. Bex, this has been an evolutionary thing. Stephen was the very first worker. Lou said that he was the first worker working directly for the Macedonians. Well, Jenny, of course, was the very first worker working and employed by the Macedonian community, working from the Macedonian community premises. So, Jenny, would you like to come forward and share a few things with us?
Thanks, Mona. Good evening, everyone. Mr. President, Lou Vasilou, Mario Shkanyechka, and other committee members, and everyone who's present here this evening. First of all, I'd like to thank you for this special occasion. It really moved me, considering I was here for 10 years, and it's really good to see, that everyone is still thinking of us. And we were interviewed that night, and some month, or years in fact, following year, it was interesting to hear that apparently on the night of the interview there was comment that was really a person was opposing the suggestion that I was the best applicant suitable for that position, and so I was appointed as a social worker, and this person, I think I can say either he liked me with passion, or even more so, I think he hated me with passion, and that was a former priest. Not this priest, not so much, but the previous one. Until one day, the year before he went away, he left Adelaide, he said, without knowing perhaps that he was going to go to Macedonia, he said to me, one of us has to go from this community. And I looked at him and I said, I think it's you, the one that has to go. And I had many wonderful experiences throughout the 10 years of my work. I had a lot of, I can mention a lot of the occasions when we started establishing the seniors group, and also although the women's section was quite well functioning at the time, but we managed to take it, one step further to organise even more activities for them. I had a lot of good memories throughout the 10 years. The support that you have all of you have given was great, and I do believe that the services were very valuable to our people. And like Stephen said, there were people, even I had people who were of non-Macedonian background, because for the same reason they did not want to go to the Serbian community or the Croatian community or the Bulgarian community, and they came to the Macedonian community. But I must say, my position was much easier than yours because of the establishment. It was fully established when I came here, except for the old office that I stayed for about 6 months in the old radio room. But I must say, above all, the best thing that happened to me was he already claimed that he was part of my office, my husband, and I love him dearly, and also I love you all, and I'm sure I will spend many, many years to come with you all.
Thank you, Jenny.
Yeah, he lost. One of these, one of those, and one of these. I didn't give it.
Prosti mi što te navredi, za ništo veke ne bi pogreši. Mojte zvorovi zaboravi, ko da ne bi bile gaženi. Bakni me i pregrni me, ja priznam veke dušovina ta. Daj me mači me, hajde prozvori, bona zveruva sudina ta. Tvoj te bakne žina, moj te beli košuli, cela noć mi buda spomeni. Dve nedeli razdeleni i osameni, zar nekoj može da te zameni? Snegovi stojat među nas, sobakneš možeš da gi rastopiš. Srce stolupa ike napravi, mosto tvoj te nežno pregati. Tvoj te bakne žina, moj te beli košuli, cela noć mi buda spomeni. Dve nedeli razdeleni i osameni, zar nekoj može da te zameni? Tvoj te bakne žina, moj te beli košuli, cela noć mi buda spomeni. Dve nedeli razdeleni i osameni, zar nekoj može da te zameni? Zar nekoj može da te zameni?
1997, and as a result of that, the position was re-advertised, and on this occasion it was a young man who had come to us from professional basketball in Skopje, Tome Petrovski, who settled into the position. We had to remodify the room because it wasn't big enough, so we knocked down a few walls, and Tome Petrovski became the social worker. And he has worked 18 months, the last 18 months, about 18 months, 20 months, 20 months with distinction. He worked as the welfare worker for Macedonians. At the same time, he was engaged in the Migrant Health Service. So basically, Tom was a full-time worker for the ethnic communities, including his own ethnic community, and we're very proud of him. So, Tom, would you like to come forward and perhaps say a few words on your own behalf?
Майкъл прав ми спомна пред 2 години ми напомена дека вероятно жени ќе напушти работата. Јас неколку пати разговаравме, се чувствував уште тогаш дека би бил способен да вршам таа работа, затоа што имав искуство веќе во заштитна служба за мигранти, Migrant Health Service, и сега таму работам. Кога што кога се огласи работното место, јас аплицирав, поднесов молба. Јас бев избран за работник. Работев околу 19-20 месеци. Со успех или без успех, тоа е на заедницата да каже. Меѓутоа има прилика во неколку наврати да добијам благодарност, тоа значи дека бар со некаков успех работев. И во некој кој што Стиве рече, ова е таков тип на работа, кога луѓе прашуваат, чекај, што работи? Каде е човек? Што работи се? Меѓутоа, секојаш има работа. И ми се чини дека мојот дел поштено го работив. Малку двоструко чувство имам. Малку сум задоволен, среќен сум што сега вака се собравме сега, што чув малку за моите претходници. Меѓутоа, со ова одлука на имиграционата служба, што после 19 години, што изгубивме грант, изгубивме ова канцеларија, практички, таа е наша физички, меѓутоа немаме работник веќе активен, и се чини дека нашата заедница малку губи затоа што помалку сме присутни, затоа што тој работник кој што работи за македонска заедница не работи само за луѓето во таа заедница на поединечна основа како клиенти или со татската група или со женска група, меѓутоа работи малку из името на заедницата, тамо надвор, во градот, тамо кај што се збиднуваат работите. Мислам дека е штета тоа што ни се случи. Веројатно постојат објективни разлози, добивме објаснување дека Комвелтот премалку пари оваа година дислоцирал во Јужна Австралија. Веројатно тоа е вистина. Мислам, независно од причините, штета е за наша заедница што тој грант ќе се положи. Меѓутоа во иднина може би ќе се сватат работите.
Big kiss, please.
I'm not falling. Thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you.
Bravo.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now.
radost prije kreh period strah. Najdobro se što zna me da zavedu van, a ti so stil od nekoj film što se narekuva. Mačo, 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 ti si car, a ja snežna neizbečna da ti bidam par. Mačo, mačo, čuvaj me od zlo, štom kriječki drugi dečki gledam pod oko. Mačo, 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 ti si car, a ja snežna neizbečna da ti bidam par. Mačo, mače moje, čuvaj me od zlo, štom kriječki drugi dečki. Zgaziš koji se osmeli, to a što je samo tvoje da go podeli. Tvoji pari se u stvari, tvoj te muskuli, odniv žensko srce lesno te se zbudali. Mačo, 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 ti si car, a ja snežna neizbečna da ti bidam par. Mačo, mačo, čuvaj me od zlo, štom kriječki drugi dečki gledam pod oko. Mačo, 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 ti si car, a ja snežna neizbežna da ti bidam par. Mačo, mače moje, čuvaj me od zlo, štom kriječki drugi dečki.
Konečka, and Mariusz has also been of great assistance to us and provided his support for the grant. As a token of our appreciation, Mariusz, we too would like to offer you something small but symbolic, we hope, for yourself, and if you could load up something for Ugo as well and pass them on to him, we'd be most grateful. I'd like you to perhaps say a few words as well if you wish to, and please come forward, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Michael, Mr. President, and guests and friends. I think you put me on the spot here, but and I'm probably not the most deserving person to be here today.
I'm sure you are.
Ugo has done a great deal of work to do that. I wish the minister was here, we could actually explain his decision. But
you better not say anything. This is on film. It's going on television.
But actually, not many people realize when the Galbali report recommended the ethno-specific services. Those services were meant to be a temporary measure to help to break barriers and to open up the mainstream services. Now, 20 years later, the scheme is still in operation, and we are still working on breaking up the barriers and opening up the services. But I think one of the most important things was for the immigration department and for the government to realize that there is much more than just breaking barriers between the general community and the ethnic community. There's also work within the ethnic communities and the issues and problems that those communities have. People like Jenny, Steve and Tomer, I think, did a great job in actually breaking those barriers and opening up the community and increasing the understanding of the issues and problems. And I think the department provided a contribution towards running the welfare program, but I'm sure that the program and the contribution from the community was much greater than the contribution from the government or from the department. So, because I think those programs are only successful if there is really a support coming from the community, and the success of those programs actually relies on the contribution and support. So, well, thank you very much, and I'm sure with or without the grants, your community will do great. And as communities develop, I think there was a time when there was a need to help people with settlement issues and new arrivals and so on. But now I think the community changes, the need changes, and perhaps there are other government departments which actually provide you probably with even more help or more perhaps suitable help than the immigration department. So. Thank you very much again. And,
again, if I could just provide you with a token of our appreciation, and for your colleague Hugo, and for yourself, a certificate from our community, and we hope you enjoy these. These were photographs which we displayed in a pictorial exhibition in 1997 to commemorate, believe it or not, the 50th anniversary of this community organisation. So we're very proud of them. A lot of these people, perhaps most of these people that you see in this room, you'll find in here, they looked a little bit younger though. They looked a little bit younger. But they're still beautiful people, as you can see. So perhaps if you take a couple of those, and if you've got enough hands, one for you and one for Hugo, and enjoy them, and thank you very much for coming.
Right, we saw scenes from the event held last Friday at the Macedonian Cultural Centre commemorating the past 20 years of work by our social workers of the Macedonian Social Welfare Office, a service that, as of the 1st of October this year, has no longer been available due to government funding cuts. Our next program will be shown on the 29th of November. From all of us here at Macedonian Horizon 21, we wish you all good night.
That's all we got.